Thank you very much, Program Director. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Sanbonani. I am Professor Marcus Ramohale, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Teaching and Learning at Mangosuthu University of Technology in Durban. I am the moderator for this session. So this is how we're going to conduct our business. I'll first give the speakers an opportunity to introduce themselves. And thereafter, there's a question that I'm going to pose to them. And they will respond to that question individually. And at the end, there will be some kind of a summation of the main viewpoints. And discussions and questions can then follow. I am from one of the 6 universities of technology in the country. And as you know, one of the key features of education in the universities of technology is cooperative education. When our UOTs started many years ago as technicons, their main mandate was to prepare students for the world of work. Of course, that mandate has been refined along the way. For example, in my institution, we believe that whilst it is important to prepare students for the world of work, we also need to prepare them to become their own employers. So we are moving into entrepreneurship education as well. Now, in all our universities of technology in the country, we invariably have departments or directorates that are responsible for cooperative education. But of course, of late, there has been some pressure on UOTs to think about dropping work-integrated learning. And various arguments have been advanced why that should happen. Now, in my institution, our argument has been we are not going to drop work-integrated learning. Actually, we are going to expand it. Our university senate about 3 years ago adopted a core curriculum comprising 4 core subjects or core modules, which all students at my institution have to take. Doesn't matter what program you are in. Now, in this core curriculum, one of the core components that students have to take is work-integrated learning or community service learning or project-based learning. Now, for depending on a program, engineering will invariably be work-integrated learning. Some students in the management sciences will also have work-integrated learning. Some programs might feel community service learning is more appropriate or project-based learning. But the idea is that students must move from surface learning, which is theoretical learning, to deep learning. And I mean, deep learning is about doing, learning by doing. Whether you do something within the workplace or in the community, the results are the same. What you're trying to do is to deepen the theory, to translate the theory into practice. And so you internalize the knowledge that you have acquired. And that kind of knowledge is knowledge that never goes away. I learned to ride a bicycle many, many years ago, and it was so difficult learning to ride a bicycle. And through trial and error, I internalized the skills. I haven't ridden a bicycle for quite some time, but I can assure you, if you were to give me a bicycle now, I'll still ride it. And why is it so? Because I have internalized the skills. So I've learned by doing. So the idea here is students must be given the opportunity to deepen what they've learned in the classroom by being exposed to a real-life world where they can do certain things, whether in industry or even in the community. So it's a pity that EXA is not here, because EXA is behind, well, some people within EXA are thinking of dropping work integrated learning. And I was very keen to interrogate them on their thinking, and it's a pity they're not here. I'm sure we'll meet them in some other forums as we go on. So without much ado, I'm going to ask the members of the panel to introduce themselves, starting from my left, then going to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramacholi. My name is Ken Duncan. I come from an organization called Swiss South African Cooperation, which is an independent development agency active in the field of skills development. Our objective is to try and improve and strengthen the public national skills development system in South Africa. And for us, the focus is on the TVET colleges and the apprenticeship system. So that's where our operations are mainly focused.
Thanks, Ken. It depends which day you catch me, I'll tell you where I come from. Today, however, I am representing business, Doctor. I come from SEFSA, which is the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa, and we represent the metals and engineering sector. So that's where I'm from.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Martin Tuafeni Moetak. I'm probably the person with the longer name here, wearing two hats. One, the secretary to the National Co-working Group for Cooperative Education in Namibia, which was established in terms of the cabinet resolution that was passed in 2011. But my full-time job is that of being I'm currently acting as a senior manager for human capital for the Namibia Students Financial Assistance Fund. And the fund would like actually to see its return on investment as far as, the funding that we are pumping into the universities. And South Africa is no exception. We actually have got more than 20% of our students are actually based in South Africa. At the end of the day, we would like to see those students being employed in the industry.
Again, my name is Sampan Silapadat. Actually, I have a couple of hats too. I coming here on the behalf of Western Digital Company. I'm the vice president who look after the operation in Thailand. I have 8,800 employees under my umbrella. Actually, Western Digital in Thailand, we have 3 locations. Total, we have 30,000 employees. Okay, and I also vice president of Thailand Association Cooperative Education. And recently, I was elected to be co-chairman of World Association Cooperative Education. Okay, I think I will be more interested to answer on the question or give some comments to some of the subject that we are interested.
Good morning, everybody. Bernice Haste here from Tahoe Sun Hotels and Casinos, representing obviously the hospitality and gaming industry. I can give my perspective from company perspective. Also run a really large organization, approximately 19,000 employees with 90 odd hotels and growing, and 14 casinos currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the panel. Now we are going to have responses to an important question. And the question that we would like our panel to respond to has to do with the value of work integrated learning. What is the value of work integrated learning? It is an important question to ask because, as we indicated earlier, there are some people who think that we should probably move away from insisting on will. And there are those who feel will, it's a key feature of modern education. So I'm going to ask the colleagues to respond to this question. I'm not going to ask you to respond to the questions in a row. I'll just call a name. And so you need to be ready because I can call your name. Yeah. I'm going to start with Mr. Ali. What is your response to this question?
Well, thank you. What's my response? I think everyone in this room, and as much as has been said at other platforms as well, understands the importance of work-integrated learning. Perhaps I never do my introduction justice in terms of CIFSA. CIFSA as a federation represents in excess of 2,000 companies, which has in excess of 300,000 employees. And across the spectrum, if you engage each of those organizations, each of those companies, every one of them will tell you, in the metal and engineering environment, practical experience is key. As much as you may even have individuals who do not achieve formal qualifications, the practical components is absolutely essential. So to the question of what is the value, huge value. And for my sins, I've had the pleasure of working in other large institutions as well, and I'm not too sure if anyone's here from Transnet, but I worked for Transnet in a similar process where we used to offer engineering bursaries to close to 500 students per annum. And I can tell you, work-integrated learning was an absolutely essential component. This noise that's being currently created around whether it should be removed out of the university system and out of the curriculum, back then we had the opinion, never. Right now, the opinion still stands, never.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ali says never. Will is a key feature of any successful education. Let's go over to Mr. Duncan. What is the value of will, in your opinion?
I think it's generally recognized that will has a tremendous value, first of all, to the student, and I thought that Dr. Silpasad brought that out very well. It improves not just the academic learning of the students, and it really does that. It improves the practical learning. It makes the student more employable because he has learned to practice the work to the standards of industry. I think equally important in the South African context, maybe even more important, is the value of work-integrated learning for the institution that is sending the students. Because it is very common in the TVET sector at least to find colleges that are completely out of touch with industry. And believe me, there's nothing gets a college lecturer to raise his game faster than to have students going to a company down the road and then coming back and saying things like, you know, the way you told us to do it, that's not how they do it down at, you know, such and such a company. Or, you know, we saw this that you haven't spoken about. And that really is a powerful incentive to the lecturer, you know, to get engaged with industry. And where you see the closing of the gap most rapidly is in the assessment of the learner's performance. Because in a college, if you're purely looking at theoretical knowledge, or maybe a little bit of applied practical work, you tend to assess, as educators do, by giving the student the benefit of the doubt, by saying, you know, he's come so far, and this is good progress, and we must recognize that, fair enough. But you know, in industry, there's only one standard of assessment. Did you do the job within spec, on time, within the budget? We don't care how far you've come from where you started. Were you on time to spec and within the budget? And this is why when students go from colleges to industry on work-integrated learning, there is such an eye-opening experience for the student and the students' educators in terms of level of performance. So I think there's a great advantage to the institution that frequently gets overlooked.
Thank you very much. You just reminded me of an experience I had years ago when I was Deputy Vice Chancellor at the University of Venda. We introduced a program in tourism and hospitality management. And we had some 2 professors from Cape Town to come and start the program. And so one of these professors goes to class and he talks about, you know, what happens in a hotel, how you do your booking, you know, what happens when a guest arrives, the cleaning. And he realizes that, you know, these students don't seem to be following what I'm saying. So, and then a thought then comes to his mind. He says, maybe they've never been to a hotel. So he decides to ask them, who of you has been to a hotel? And there was no one in that classroom. There was that gap between the theory and the real world. So I think the point about WIL helping to bridge the gap is very, very important. Ms. Bennis, what's your viewpoint?
In our industry, WIL is extremely important. I think threefold, once again, from the universities or TVET colleges' perspective, whereby we can give valuable feedback on whether what they are teaching the students is still valuable in the business, simply because business changes at a great speed, and the universities and colleges need to be keeping up with those changes. From the students' perspective, I think it's exceptionally important. Employability obviously is a big one for us. We actually assess the students after their internships, and when they're at their 3rd year, we actually send out a list saying these are the employable people to our entire business. So you would find that students that have done an internship within our organization could very well get employed if they perform very well during their WIL time within our organization. From a company perspective, it's a steady stream of employable people. Why would we go out into the wide open spaces and employ people? The WIL students who we have there, we already know them. They're already working in our organization. So they're a good place to start, and us knowing exactly who they are and how they perform. So for all 3 of those, I think it is very important, and I think it would be a great pity should they stop WIL.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide some stats, and that's why I say I'm assuming in the room every one of us is firmly embedded in the fact that we need WIL to happen. But if you go and look at the research, and we've recently conducted research, once again, it depends on which day you catch me, out of the MERS-CETA, we've conducted research to look at extremely hard-to-fill vacancies in various engineering arenas. And the research shows time and time again, it's a lack of experience that is giving rise to the hard-to-fill vacancies and extremely hard-to-fill vacancies. And if you go and look across at all the research, and this is empirical research, it is showing that. That experience is absolutely essential, and that experience comes through the WIL program. I mentioned that when we were Transnet, and I see Suzanne sitting right in the front row, she worked closely with me on those programs where we used to take on in excess of 500 students a year. We had more than an 85% success rate in placing those individuals into learning. Why? Because we ran a graduate placement program. We had engineers in training, technicians in training, artisans in training, supply chain graduates in training, finance graduates in training, the tip and top programs that you might be aware of as well. They were very successful for one reason, that you were able to bed students in, and as Denise has mentioned, what it does is it imparts the culture of the organization. It imparts the value proposition of what does it mean to be in the world of work. One of the things that we constantly look at and that has been lacking is the soft skills component in a lot of these hard qualifications. If they're not gearing it as part of the qualification, where are they going to get it? The only time they're going to get it is when they're immersed into the workplace. And that's where they get a true understanding of it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martin?
Thank you. The value of WIL, or cooperative education, I prefer co-op, is threefold. And I would like to start from the institutional perspective, where many at times the institutions of higher learning tend not to recognize that co-op could in fact improve the institution's image. As far as the reputation of the institution is concerned, the university, which does not value cooperative education, actually has less chance of attracting, the best out of this world. So your intern rate tend to increase because the students will, in fact, would want to associate themselves with your institution. And from a student perspective, it is not only about employability, because when a student comes into the world of work, there are certain things they would begin to associate themselves with. For instance, there are those soft aspects within the jobs that are required in certain jobs. Coming from a service-oriented industry, I can give an example of a student who thought that maybe when I become a professional one day, I will be able to serve, say, students. And when you are confronted by the students who actually wants the fees actually to, to fall, and you actually do not belong to that environment, you can't manage that tension. What is it that you are going to do? So you find these students coming into this environment, and they would make a right decision, because this is very critical for their futures. Because, it doesn't really help, to be studying at the university for 4 years, 4 good years. You come and join the industry, and only to realize that you actually don't belong, to a certain profession. That is already a waste of resources, the waste of time, and many other things. And also to the employer, when a student has gone through a well-coordinated co-op, this student does not only enhance the patient, but at the same time, this student will come with, that edge of increasing the productivity, because there is a little bit that the student has learned during that process, and there is no need for the employer actually to spend more money on retraining a student. So this student is already ready, to participate and make a meaningful contribution. So there is actually reduction on the cost associated with training, and there's also cost reduction as far as recruitment is concerned, because what happens at times, the employers would also recognize the potential within these interns, and then they would make a decision to retain such an intern and eventually becomes a full-time employee. So there are greater benefits to both the employers, the students, and the institutions.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. Let's move on to Dr. Sampar.
I would speak in T perspective. Number one, when we talk about education, I look into T circle. Education for academic, for knowledge, that one. The second one is the education for living, for life. And the third one, which is also equally important, is the education for career. So now it's the challenge for all of us how to balance those T education perspective together. That's number one. The second idea is you look to the student. I mean, they're born and they start to go to the school at the age of 5 or 6. And when they come to university at the age of 18, 19, and mostly of them, they stay with us for 4 or 5 years. And they finish the graduation for bachelor degree at the age of 22 and 23. But the other half of their life, we did 35 years more, and mostly of the people, they are in the working field. And to be fair, I mean, those are the critical part of each individual life. From the age of 20-something, work until the age of 55 or 60s. So that's why work integrated learning is so important. The last but not least, in my perspective, is the word of the customer quality. You look to the whole logistic of the people moving from from cradle to the grave. You can't do each segment by your own silo. That's why you look to the business logistics, what they have changed and learned for the past 20 years or 30 years. Now, every one of us have a lot of interactions, a lot of collaborations with the supplier. I mean, if you let the supplier build their own product without our involvement, we always surprised whenever we receive the product from them. And most of the products, sometimes it doesn't work in the today industry requirements. So that's why you see a lot of the supplier and the customer working relationship together. And I mean, try to work on something really seamlessly. And that should answer why work integrated learning is so important.
Dr. Sampat, I've tried to sort of summarize the main viewpoints, and I'm sure you can have your own additions as well. It seems to me that what the panel has been saying is that work integrated learning is of great importance because there is there's a tremendous benefit to 3 important stakeholders. First, it is the student, and this is what education is about. The first person to benefit is the student. And how does the student benefit from work integrated learning? The student benefits because they are given an opportunity to progress from theoretical learning to practical learning. And in some programs, this is so vital, you can't avoid it. Just staying within the classroom and reading a textbook is not enough. So they need to progress to the work environment. Also, the students benefit because they get introduced to the workplace, to corporate culture, as it were. And that, in a sense, also makes them employable. I think that was stressed so much, the employability factor. So for the student, there are clear educational arguments that can be made from the point of view of educational theory, why it is important to have work-integrated learning, to learn by doing. In that way, you deepen what you've learned. And of course, there's also the employability part. And for the institutions that allow for work-integrated learning, it brings them into closer partnership with industry, and in a sense also therefore improves their public image. But also for these institutions, they benefit because the feedback that they receive from industry helps to improve the curriculum. And that is why in many institutions you have advisory boards. You have people from industry who sit in those boards and they give feedback to a department how to improve the program. So work-integrated learning also plays that kind of a role. So it brings about curriculum improvements. And the lecturers also benefit because that feedback also helps them to see how to improve their teaching. And then there is the third beneficiary, and that is the employer. The employer benefits. One of the major complaints of employers, even in this country, is that the students that are produced by our higher education system are not ready for the world of work. So WIL helps them to be work ready. And the point was made that because of the exposure that they have benefited from, these students do not need a lot of retraining. So from the point of view of the employer, there is that benefit, that there will not be much investment by way of retraining. So in a sense, if you look at all the three stakeholders in the educational enterprise, the student, the institution, and the employer, it's a win-win situation. I'm sure we can agree. It's a win-win situation. So the arguments are very, very strong why we need WIL. What we don't understand is why some people think we can do without WIL. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to give you the opportunity to add to the viewpoints that have been expressed, or even to ask your own questions. Over to you.
Hello to the panel. I'm from the Paper Manufacturers Association of South Africa. The benefits of WIL and the value of WIL is not under dispute here. Okay, that's what I want to say. But what I'd like to know is, what is SASCI doing about the fact that DUT has dropped WIL, UNISA is already planning to drop WIL, but then again we just learned that MUT is retaining it. So we'd like to know what is the way forward, especially regarding decisions and timeframes, because that is very important to industry. We've got a plan from our side as well. Thank you.
All right, we'll take that one first. Any other question?
My name is Chamis Kenjan. I represent organized business in Southern African National, in Southern African Society for Cooperative Education. That is BUSA and Black Business Council. My question, Professor Ramachale, is directed to you. I've just read an email that reminds me of the road accident benefit bill that we're dealing with in social dialogue in NEDLAC. My question is with respect to your cycling analogy experience with respect to the fact that the country is struggling with the rapid transport system. In that regard, we all know that the road ordinance by the motorist has got no regard, not only for cyclists, bikers, motorbikers. Mine is, in your quest to say, deepen work integrated learning, how can we, my other cap, I'm the president of Southern African National Cooperative Council, driving provincial work integrated learning cooperatives. How can we partner to align what the Department of Transport in this country is inclined to doing for the rapid transport system, introducing cycling? There is no infrastructure for it, let alone the alignment to the road ordinance. Are you ready to dip into that far?
All right, thank you very much. We'll come to that later.
Thank you. My name is Hubert Mashabane. I'm from the Department of Higher Education and Training. First, it's a comment. I think it's all in well to say that there are benefits of WIL. The question might be, if you're presented with two students or graduates, one has gone through a WIL program, the other hasn't gone through a WIL program. How do you tell the difference between the two if you are an employer? First, they will give you their academic qualifications. They don't state anything about this one having gone through WIL or not. Even when you read their transcript, you will see nothing that tells you this student went through a WIL program. So unless you can measure that component and assign a particular value to it, it becomes difficult for us to understand that value. Yes, on a superficial level, if you now examine someone and ask them questions. I'm sure those in the academic environment might want to then help us by kind of measuring and assigning some value to this particular component.
Thank you very much. Let's take the last question and then we'll get responses and then take the next set of questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Andre van der Bijl from CPUT, and we are working. We've heard a couple of really interesting presentations from people representing the broad spectrum vertically in South Africa, from TVETs up into higher education, and some international speakers. What I'm seeming to miss, and you're speaking to the converted, I suspect, because we pay to be here. What I'm missing is from all of you, a vision or a strategy that can promote WIL in, and this is my words, in the face of a growing antagonisms towards WIL on the one hand, and a lack of WIL coordination competences on the other hand. TVETs want to do WIL, but they don't have the people who can do it. UOTs want to become universities, universities want to become something else. And WIL is the thing that is suffering. We all know that, but what can you do from your chairs to really make us believe that you can change this?
All right, thank you very much. We will now give an opportunity to the panel to respond to the questions. Maybe the easy one to respond to would be about how do you distinguish between a student who's done WIL and one who hasn't. Now, in the normal course of things, an academic record of a student must show that the student has done work-integrated learning. If it doesn't show, then there's something wrong with the system. The certificate itself will not show, but the academic record must show. Mr. Duncan.
I've chosen to speak first here because that allows me to answer or respond to two of the easier questions. And you know, these are really important issues that have been raised from the floor. I want to first of all take it sort of in reverse order, and that is Professor van der Bijl's point about the lack of WIL coordinating competence in educational institutions, and you see it most clearly in the TVETs, I think less so in higher education, and most of all in industry itself. And that is a real problem, that to get value out of WIL, it's got to be well organized. If you simply send a student to industry to wander around aimlessly, you annoy everybody and he gets no benefit from it. So Carver Pop, who's here, Carver, stick your hand up, where are you? He's floating around somewhere. He's doing some very interesting work and developing a program specifically aimed at industry on the management of WIL students. And hopefully that will become an accredited program at some point. In the meantime, my own organization has a structured program that we put into the TVET colleges, and they're all 50 of the colleges are using it to a greater or lesser extent, which involves the training of the college personnel and then also training of industry personnel, the sender and the receiver, and then closing the feedback loop. So there is some work being done in that field, but it's early days and there's a long way to go, no question about that. If I may also just pick up briefly on Hubert Mashabane's very good point, I thought, about the importance of assessment. Because let's face it, students work to the test, isn't that so? They learn to the test. So if there is no real assessment of the work that they do on their WIL experience, then it will be interesting and it will be useful up to a point, but they certainly are not going to put their full energies into it. And here the DHET, I think, has responded quite well to this challenge, that within the TVET colleges, they have a program of continuous assessment during the year, and then a summative assessment at the end of the year. And as of next year, WIL assessments, that's assessment of the student's performance in the workplace, will be built into those assessments. Again, early days, we're feeling our way along. What's the best way to assess a student on the job? How do you solve the problem that not all the students are going into WIL from the colleges at the moment? So, you're giving two different kinds of assessment to students on the same program. These issues have still got to be resolved. But I think that the department understands the direction it has to go in and is making some good steps towards that. So there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to leave the really tough question from our colleague in the paper, pulp and fiber industry as to what SASCI can do to take this forward. I'll leave this to my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Any responses from the panel? Mr. Ali?
I'll do what normally gets done. I agree with Ken. But no, coming back to the question around, how does one measure and differentiate between two students? I think the other question that one wants to ask is, if you don't do the assessment appropriately upon recruitment, what are the consequences for my business? What does it mean for managing for incapacity due to performance? And I think those things are what we need to be cognizant of. So as much as you may not be able to upfront distinguish, I think you need to tighten up your recruitment practices and your hiring practices and align to the assessment, because you're going to get a whole lot of cases lined up at the CCMA where individuals are getting dismissed because of incapacity. And that's another problem that this then leads to. So yeah, That's my perspective on how one measures. It's proper assessment, proper recruitment, and ensuring that we measure the right things. In terms of how do we change the perspective on WIL, I think there needs to be a great deal of advocacy and lobbying. And advocacy and lobbying needs to happen at the appropriate channels. As you said, it's a shame that X is not here, because one would have liked to hear their perspective as well, as why is that advocated then for the removal of it. One understands there's huge amounts of constraints and challenges throughout the system. You know, there's financial resource shortages. If you ask business, what are some of the reasons that you can't take on these students for work-integrated learning, they're going to tell you, where is the work? You know, we talk about strategic integrated projects that are rolling out, and they will create employment opportunities and possibilities for experience, etc., etc. The question is that work is non-existent at the moment. So the economical situation that we're faced with as a country further accentuates this problem that we cannot really open up doors as widely as we would like to. You know, I've been out to industry and I've been out to organizations, and I said to them, guys, I will get you funding for your learners to put them through work-integrated learning. And they said, well, Mushtaq, short of crossing that ethical line that says I've really given qualitative work-integrated learning and experience to the student, the problem that I sit with is I don't have work. I can bring them into the workplace, benefit from the funding, add it to my bottom line, and when that student is walking out of my plant, has not been exposed to every arena that they should have been. So that quality component starts kicking in. So we have these kind of challenges in industry, and I think the bigger discussion that needs to happen is, what do we do about these challenges? How do we become more innovative in what we do? You know, Ken and I have been working a few times on a number of things and saying, how do we then innovate the way we impart this experience? You know, at one stage when Gypsy and Asgisa was rolling out, we talked about bringing retirees back into the workplace and saying, how do we get them involved to offer workplace experience, coach and mentor, etc., in production plants? One of the questions I'm asking is, in the engineering field, we normally work 5 days a week, or at a push would go 6 days a week. Why don't we start lobbying and advocating for companies to start opening up their doors on a Sunday and run widgets through the plant so that we can give that kind of exposure? Yes, we might have an excess supply of widgets, but somewhere along the line we might even create a drop in the price of those widgets. So that's the kind of thinking that we need. And we need that kind of thinking from these kind of platforms, from all social partners, not just from business, not just from higher education, but all social partners to sit and talk and work together on it and come up with concrete plans, not just talk as we normally do.
Thank you very much.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.